does heart line represent? So the heart line is one amongst the three major lines marked on the palm. This is our lifeline, which tells about the major events of your life. Your physical health, degree of your stamina can easily be mapped by the scrutinization of your lifeline. This line also tells about the quality of your life. This is our headline, which tells about your intellectual aspect of your personality, your judgment skills, your mentality, your intelligence, your memory, your thinking pattern, how you comprehend things can also be mapped by the scrutinization of this headline. Last amongst the major lines marked on the palm is the heart line. The scope of the heart line can be understood on the basis of the three parameters. First is that this line tells about the physical organ heart. Second is the psychological aspect. This line tells about the emotional aspect of your personality, how you relate to others on an emotional level, your innermost feelings. And third is about the spiritual aspect. This line also tells about how much potential you have to sacrifice yourself for the higher goals, for the higher goods, the philanthropy, the humanitarian pursuits, as well as the surrender and the compassion inculcated in someone's personality can easily be mapped by the scrutinization of this heart line. Now we will continue from where we left in the last part when we were discussing about the importance of the origin of the heart line. So the very first thing which you people need to understand is that contrary to the claim of the majority of the palmists across the world, you need to understand that this heart line originates from over this portion of the palm, close to the mount of the Jupiter and the mount of the Saturn. Next thing is why it is important to know and study the origin of the heart line. It is important because it tells us what motivates someone's desire, to get into some kind of committed and emotional relationship. Whether that desire, that motivation is sensual driven, whether that is love driven, or whether that is some ulterior motive driven. That can easily be mapped by checking the the origin of the heart line, from where this is originating. So we have discussed this thing, just a quick overview what we have discussed in the last video, that what has been written. If you just have to give a quick overview, then you will just get to know that any heart line originating from the mount of the Jupiter makes someone very idealistic, beginning from the mount of the Saturn makes someone very sensual, and at the midpoint of this mount and this mount just makes someone very practical. But will that suffice? No, that is not. Like the way it happens in astrology, the moon which is very important, which tells about your thinking pattern, your mind. Intelligence is Mercury, your mind is moon. So the placement of moon in whichever sign tells about your thinking pattern. So let's say for example, if moon is in Aries sign, so does that mean all those people across the world who have their moon in Aries sign will think in the same ways? That is completely false. Why? Because behind the sign of Aries there are three nakshatras, the Ashwini, the Bharani, the Kritika. So same ways, if you want to understand and gain the nuances of palmistry, you need to study it very deeply. So what we are going to do is we are just going to now take all the mounts, all the origin points of the heart line one by one, and then we will study in detail all aspect of it, so that you will get to know just by looking at someone's palm the origin of the heart line, the state of the heart line. You can be very sure just by having a fair just a casual sight, you can be very much sure that you know how this guy feel, not like the way he is projecting himself in the outside world, how this person is wired right from inside. So the first thing is, what we have to do is that we have to first, like the way it happens in the fingers, that the first flange tells about the sattva guna, the second flange tells about the rajas guna, and third tells about the tamasic guna. So this is about the mental, the mental pursuits, the intellect, the soul. Second is about the materialism, the practical, and third is about the tamas, which is about the sensory indulgences. So same is the way we have to divide this mount, the Jupiter mount, which we're studying first, into three domains, into three parts. So what would happen is that, for example, this is our mount. So the portion above the headline and the lifeline is the domain allotted to the mount of the Jupiter. So let's say for example, if this is our mount of Jupiter, we are going to divide it in three equal regions. So first would remain to be the mental, the sattva, second would remain to be the rajas, and third would remain to be the tamas. So in order to first understand this concept, you have to first study and have you need to get some little bit of overview of what Jupiter mount represents. So the Jupiter mount represents leadership, ambition, ego, ambition, all those spiritual and righteous traits. So here what we are doing is we are studying about the origin of the heart line. So we can look at it from a very broader view. So from the broader view, we'll just get to know that in whomsoever hand the heart line is originating from the mount of the Jupiter, this person for sure would remain to be very loyal in relationship, would remain to be very loving, very caring, very sentimental, very emotional. But the only flaw would remain to be that this person would remain to be very idealistic, too good for his bad. So that is the one flaw. Second aspect of the mount of Jupiter is about the ego, about the ambition. So that might be the case when this portion is afflicted. So that person would get too much preoccupied by the titles, by the designation. So the positive aspect of the Jupiter is that the person would feel himself a part of the society. But in negative aspect, this person just, all those success and achievements would dance on his head, just make him too, proudy, too egoistic. So that fear would remain to be there. But just because we are now getting into the detail, we are bifurcation this, doing the bifurcation of this origin point of the heart line from the mount of the Jupiter. So we'll take the case one by one. So let's say, for example, when you'll find the heart line to be originating straight from the mount of the Jupiter. So what would happen? So you people need to understand that when it comes to the marital harmony or of all the matters of emotions, affection and the heart, there are two planets which poses maximum threat. One is the Mars because of its true intensity, whether in terms of the sexuality or whether in terms of the aggression. And second is Jupiter. Like the way I said, it is too good for someone's bad. A girl who would have strong Jupiter would become too, idealistic, and her, list of priorities would be too high that it would become very difficult for a guy to fulfill all those expectation of the girl. So that remain to be a problem with the Jupiterian people. So what would happen is, when you will find the heart line to be originating deep on the mount of the Jupiter, it has reached the first Sattva region. So these people, the idealism quotient would remain to be very high. Like the way I have said, all the positive qualities of Jupiter would remain inculcated in these people's matters of the heart, in the form of loyalty, faithfulness. They will be very faithful, they will be loyal, they will be very sentimental, they will be very caring, they will they'll be like very caring. But when it comes to fulfilling their list of do's and don'ts, when it comes to fulfilling their kind of their expectations, then the other person will feel little bit of kind of suffocated in the relationship. So this remain to be the case when you will find the heart line to be originating right from the top. Even their intellectual expectation remain to be very high. They would want their partner to be from someone who would be like very scholar, someone who would be like very intelligent. So these kind of expectations we can expect in the thought process of someone when you will find the heart line to be originating from the top of the first conscious portion, the Sattva world of the mount of the Jupiter. Next is, let's say for example, you will find this to be in a beginning on a 4 kind of pattern. So something like this. Like the way I have already explained to people, when it comes to the folk pattern, so this just intensifies the signification of any line. So what is going to happen is that these people would become too idealistic. These people would kind of become too, their expectation would remain to be too high. They'll be like very righteous, they'll be like very spiritual. But when it comes to the matters of the heart, the affection, the emotions, so all those people who would be in their relationship, they might face the heat because of their partner's too high expectation. This is about when you'll find the heart line to be originating on the first Sattvic world. And next is, let's say when you'll find the heart line to be originating on the Rajas world, something like this. So what kind of signification we can expect? So you need to understand that whenever you will find the heart line to be originating from the Rajas world, so all the Rajas qualities, Rajas guna will take precedence. So what will happen is that for these people, their social interaction would take precedence. They just don't want to get into a relationship. They also want to socially interact, as well as just because Rajas guna is predominant, so the expectation of these people would also be high on the grounds of how the person looks, the person's looks, the person's qualification, his social standing. So all these things will also take precedence in the thought process of this person. So when it comes to getting into and forming any of the relationships, so this person will have this kind of benchmark, this kind of thought process with all those kind of people with this person, with this kind of heart line is interacting. These people will be like very intellectual. They'll be like their looks remain to be very savvy, what kind of brands they are wearing, how they are carrying themselves, what kind of background they're coming from, what is their social standing. So all these things would matter a lot for these kind of people. And same ways, when this line would be terminating or sorry originating on a fork kind of formation, so those list of do's and don'ts would become more high, would increase. So this is with the second kind of formation. Third is when you'll find the heart line to be originating from the tamas world, for somewhere over here. So what kind of signification we can expect? So like the way up, now you have to understand what is going to happen is that tamas in any case means, you know, all the indulgences, all the physicality is now coming into play. So for these people, the idealism in the matters of love and sexuality would also be high. That's the one thing. Second thing is that just because if you can see now what is happening is that the line is just to reach the tamas world, the line is now traveling straight on the palm. So this is just, these people are, and like the way I have explained this thing at the time when we were discussing the different kind of formation of the lines, that the straight lines in palmistry represent unbending, unrelenting kind of nature. So what would happen is that with these people, they will be like very much vulnerable towards, remaining very unbending, inflexible in the relationship. So their expectation would remain to be high. That's the one thing. But if those expectations will not get fulfilled, these people might feel, frustrated, kind of become kind of bit offended. So those kind of feelings and those kind of things would trouble these people, though the signification of Jupiter would remain to be there. These people would remain to be realistic, sentimental, and these people would remain to be very loyal, very spiritual, very caring, but with the clause of too much of the possessiveness. So they'll be like very much on the radar of becoming too possessive in the matters of their heart and with their expectation from their partners. So this is with the origin of the Jupiter on the different three worlds which we have discussed. Now is the second, where we are going to discuss the origin of the heart line on mount of Mars. So like the way when we were having an overview of all the different origin points, and I have explained to people that whensoever the heart line originates from the mount of the Mars, these people would remain to be very vulnerable to negative thinking and resorting to physical violence in order to express their frustration. So what is the reason for that? You need to understand that the origin of the feelings is getting the foundation, is getting the pedestal of the aggressive Mars. So this is the plane of the Mars, and even the Mars which has got two regions on the palm. This portion which is your inner mount of Mars, which represents your aggression, your violence, and this portion is your outer mount of the Mars. So this is our inner mount of the Mars, Mars negative, and this is our outer mount of the Mars, Mars positive. This represents our mental strength, our perseverance. This represents our violence, our aggression. So whensoever the line is originating straight from the inner mount of the Mars, so it is being infused the energy, the violence of the planet Mars. So you need to first understand that what does this inner mount of the Mars represent. So this inner mount of the Mars represents your primitive instincts for survival. So when I say primitive instincts, this could be in the form of some gut feeling. This could also be, in the form of, when I say primitive instincts, it's mean, one is the form of, you eating the food in a normal way. And another thing is like the way primitive man used to eat, using their claws or, getting into fist fight. So that is what I mean by primitive instincts. That's the first thing. Second thing is, this portion also tells about your, your ability, the ability of your nervous system to handle any kind of the negative stimulus. This portion also represents, all those emotions and feelings which you have experienced but you couldn't explain. You need to understand that this outer mount of the Mars represents your good deeds done in the past life. Pura Punya is seen from over here, this point of time, and this point represents all your deeds which you have experienced, all your experiences, your emotions, the repressed memories which you cannot explain. So any point of time you will find the heart line to be originating from inner mount of the Mars. So this would just represent these people first of all would remain to be very cautious, they would remain to be very defensive in the form of whensoever they have to form any kind of relationship, and this lack of feeling for their own goodness would even reflect in kind of forming relationship with other people. They will also look at other people with a kind of suspicion and with the kind of doubtfulness, which would just create a hurdle for forming a harmonious relationship with other people and letting other people come into their life. So that would remain to be the first point. Second would remain to be their expectation, idealism would remain to be high, and when those expectations will not get fulfilled, they would that will get expressed in the form of resentment, frustration. So in a nutshell, any point of time you'll find the heart line to be originating from here, from the inner mount of the Mars. So in order to understand it deeply, we will also divide this region as well in three worlds. So first is we divided the inner mount of the Mars in the Sattva, second is the Rajas world, and third is the Tamas world. So what is going to happen is, any point of time you'll find the heart line originating from here, from the first Sattva world. So this would just represent these people would remain vulnerable towards negative thinking. That's the first case. Second is, let's say you have found this heart line to be originating further more deep onto the second world. So this would just explain that these people, in terms of expressing their frustration, would remain to be someone among those who crib a lot, who scold others, who criticize others. So first case was negative thinking, second was expressing frustration via scolding, criticism, sarcasm, and third and the worst is, and the most intense is, when you'll find the heart line to be reaching too deep onto the tamas world. These people would resort to the physical violence in order to express their dissatisfaction. So this is with the origin of the heart line from the inner mount of the Mars. And next is, see, one case is that the heart line is straight away originating from here, from the inner mount of the Mars. Second is, let's say you have found those cases where the line has moved on the path of the mount of the Jupiter, and then slightly it has deflected on the inner mount of the Mars. So what I'm saying is that the line has originated from here, it has moved onto the direction of the mount of the Jupiter, and then it has started on its prescribed path and reached to the percussion side. So what is going to happen is that the positive qualities of the Jupiter would remain in their matters of the heart, in their feelings, the way they feel things. So in the form of cheerfulness, sentiments would remain, loyalty, all that would remain in their behavior, their thinking process, their feelings. But the typical trait of the Mars of holding negative emotions would remain, and which would manifest in the form of short burst of the frustration at the very wrong times, inappropriate times. So that would remain to be the first case. And second, like the way I always say, because Jupiter is also getting involved, idealism, high expectation, and when those expectations are not getting fulfilled, then reacting in the form of resentment and negativity, and based on the world, the form of disapproval, either in negative thinking or sarcasm or violence. So I hope you guys found this video informational. In next subsequent videos on the origin of the heart line, we will just discuss it from the origin when the heart line is originating from the mount of the Saturn, as well as from other points.